Hey, if you are not just learning to code, this video is for you. Up until now, we've been looking at pretty simple modifications of a block to make your own game. But now, let's look at something a little more experienced developer might want to do. We'll be going from this, the basic drag into categories that comes with 7gen blocks, to this. This may not look very much like the drag into categories game, but is actually based on the exact same code. And it is another way to assess whether or not students have learned. Of the differences here and how we got there. There are different color scheme here. That comes from our theme that I'll talk about shortly. There are different instructions. That comes from the config file. Notice up here we have a timer, so it's more like a game. And then our categories, instead of being boxes that have text on them, are just, well, I guess they are boxes of text, but they're more images. So this is just an image. And then down here, as opposed to boxes of statements, we have, again, images. So let's take a look at how we got there. So we start with the drag in items into categories block. We copied this from the 7gen blocks into our current project. And like every block, it's got an HTML file, it's got a config file. It's also got an images folder, which is where the images are used, and it's got an audio folder. And here's our original config file that comes with the blocks. We've got instructions, drag each box to the group whose view it represents, the instructions audio, instructions text, match the views with the party in this situation, completion URL where it goes next, and an incorrect URL where it goes next if it's wrong. Randomize items true if there's a hint message, that'll show, and the number of items on the screen, number of answers required, and seconds. So that was the original, and then here's the categories. We'll take a look at them in a minute. Now, here is how I changed it. This is in my recycle block down here, which is the final one that I showed you with the different bins. So I changed the instructions, drag each item into the correct bin. I did not have an instructions audio there, instructions page 1 audio, so it's not there. Drag each item to the correct bin is the instructions that show at the top of the page. So there's as you'll see in a second, there's an initial instructions, and then there's instructions at the top of the page, because one thing we have learned is the kids don't read instructions. Completion URL, this is where they go once they have dragged all the items into the correct bins or the incorrect bins. In this case, there is no different incorrect URL. Items are still randomized. The number of items on the screen at the same time is still 4. I think it's a bad idea to have too many items on screen at once. We've increased the number of answers required to 12 because this is supposed to be more game-like. So just having 4 or 6 wouldn't be much of a game if you have 60 seconds. And to have a timer, we've increased the number of seconds from 0 to 60. So now a timer will show up. Let's take a look at our categories in our original config file. Those categories were images as well. And then there was a category title that said Eastern Shoshone, Northern Arapaho. Here, we don't have any category title, we just have the images. Now, in this case, it says waste or organic on the bins, but you can have images that don't have any text on them. So they're just images. Now, in creating the items, over here in the original ones, the items had an item title and a category ID. That's super important. The category ID has to match up. So category 1, these things that have a category ID of category 1, if they're dragged here, are going to be scored as correct. Down here, I have an image, so I don't have an image title. So that's the only difference. If you want text, you have an item title, and it's going to show up as a box with the text in it. If you just want an image, you have image instead of item title and the URL for the image. And then this achievements down here, this is optional if you have it. when they complete this activity, your menu will show a medal for it. So that in the original drag into categories config file is not here and also optional. If you do have this achievement, then you need to add achievements to the export. And again, this kind of level of change is something that we generally don't see people doing that are new to coding, that are really interested in low code. But I just wanted to show you that as a developer, you can make some significant changes. And then let's look at the recycle, because generally I say you don't need to change anything in the HTML. I actually, in this case, changed the name to recycle.html. I adjusted the size of the instructions. I adjusted the height of the images because I wanted those category divs to be taller. If you remember from the original one, which we'll go back and look at these two in a minute, the original drag into categories had a box there, and here I wanted them to be taller. So you can, it's not required, but you can go in and add CSS to the HTML. And also, one last change, you might be wondering, well, how come the color scheme is different? Well, because when you pick a theme, I just picked a different game theme, and when you pick a game theme and put it in your block, it's going to set all of the colors throughout the entire game to that. But that is another video. So let's just go back and take one final look. You can see here, this is what the achievements did. Now that I had played this successfully, it shows this little medal here that I had done it. And there's our instructions: drag each item to the correct bin, which I had changed in the config file. Now you can see that the height of each of these images that I had added added the CSS in the HTML file is different. You can see that there's a transparent background on each of these items that I also changed the CSS in the HTML file. So this just shows some of the things you can do with CSS and HTML and the ways that you can change the drag into categories. And just to go back to the contrast, here is how this block looked originally. So for experienced developers as well as newbies just learning to code for the very first time, there's something for everybody in 7gen blocks.